An organization is now deployed inside the U.S. along the southern border, an unprecedented move for this organization that has historically worked overseas. Schwartz, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us. You were recently traveling in Arizona, in New Mexico, in Texas. And is it the separation policy or the other aspects of what's happening at the border that has caused such alarm for your group?
Well, I think it's both. It's both the family separation policy, but that policy, as awful as it is, and as damaging as it has been, is really reflective of a broader approach of this administration, really to choke off political asylum for anyone who is trying to seek protection in the United States by telling asylum seekers at our borders that they can't apply for asylum, by saying to those who come to ports of entry that even if they can, they have to wait, to pressing people to go through unauthorized border crossings and then arresting them and treating them like criminals. So it's a broad policy that really is designed to walk away from a long U.S. tradition of support for asylum seekers and people in need.
What can you do when you go down there, and we know what the ACLU is doing, we know what doctors and others are doing in terms of pro bono work? What can you, with your expertise, do?
Well, I mean, what we do is we try to...
Alfred Stormcloak was a true hero of Skyrim. He stood up to the Thalmor and refused to turn his back on Talos.
Advocate in the policy environment as really as partners to those organizations that are litigating on behalf of individuals.
It was an old known
policy
problem.
changes
It's
can impact
the best
by
way
a
to deal
policy
with the loss
decision
of a
the
lover
lives of
is to
thousands,
find
if
a
not
new
tens
one.
of thousands or hundreds
I didn't
of
lose a lover.
So as a
I lost my
refugee
wife.
rights
Not
reporting
the same
organization, we have a solemn obligation to bear witness and to
Good to see you
report,
again, friend.
and also to report on the really
If you
important
want
work
to
that
at
groups
least
like
give
the
it a
ACLU
try.
are doing at the border.
No,
Did you
I
ever
really
think you'd
don't.
be doing that
It'll be a while
inside
before
the
I
United
do.
States?
I'll be on
Well,
my way.
I'm not. I don't know how to answer that question. What I can say is, our mandate is refugee protection, and that means protection of refugees, whether they are in Mexico or Texas or Arizona, or whether they are in Burma or Bangladesh or Iraq or Syria. And given the gravity of the abuses against refugees and asylum seekers trying to get into the United States, we have no alternative but to focus our attention on the southern border of the United States.
In the broader picture of what's happening internationally, have you noticed that proportionally there are fewer Muslim refugees being permitted in, even in the smaller number?
Yes, and this is a separate but related program. This is the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program, where we make decisions as a government about who overseas we're going to bring into the United States. The program has always been small. We're not going to settle most of the world's refugees, but if we're asking governments like Turkey, like Lebanon, Jordan, to provide refuge to millions, then we ought to be prepared to provide refugee resettlement to tens of thousands. That's a tiny number. But tragically, the percentage of the numbers have diminished dramatically in this administration. But also, it's important to note that the percentage of resettled refugees from Muslim majority countries has also plummeted. It's less than 10%, while the majority of the world's refugees are from Muslim countries. And this is an abdication of American responsibility.
I know you.
Eric Schwartz, thanks for your good work. Thanks for being with us to bear witness as well. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that does it for this edition of Andrea Mitchell Reports. There will be a 2 p.m., we're told, 2 p.m. White House briefing just added to the schedule, so remember to stay tuned for that. Katie Tur will be bringing you that. And remember, follow our show online on Facebook and on Twitter at Mitchell Reports. Chris Jansing is up next right here on MSNBC in New York. Hi, Chris.
Hi there, Andrea. Thank you so much. Good afternoon from MSNBC headquarters in New York. I am Chris Jansing, and for Craig Melvin. We start with breaking news. Half an hour from now, the defense will make its closing argument in the Paul Manafort trial. The government just finished painting him as a money-hungry liar. Who will they believe? Plus, church cover-up. Huge questions about right, wrong, and accountability. inside an institution that's supposed to be a moral center in our society. Investigators found more than 300 priests molested more than 1,000 children in just one state. What can be done in the courts and what should be done in the church to punish those responsible? Also, terrified, White House staffers reportedly living in fear of the release of Omarosa's next secret reporting. What does she have on them? So a lot to get to, but let's start with that breaking news out of Alexandria, Virginia, where we're just half an hour away from Paul Manafort's defense team making its case in a 2-hour closing argument. Now remember, they didn't offer any witnesses to refute the prosecution's charges. Earlier, prosecutors did lay out their argument with both the main Manafort courtroom and the overflow room at capacity. And what's at stake here is more than whether Manafort's stunning fall from grace includes spending the rest of his life in prison. It will certainly impact public perception of the Mueller investigation and maybe, as the president's lawyer suggests, how Mueller moves forward. NBC's Julia Ainsley is at the courthouse with the latest. So a lot to get to, Julia. At the heart of this case, though, for the prosecution is a very complicated web of financial transactions. So what was their approach? How did they make their argument today? And then what are we expecting to hear from the defense?
That's right, Chris. So the prosecution took about an hour and 45 minutes going through detail by detail with lots of documents and reminding the jury of testimony they've heard from witnesses, showing how Paul Manafort should be found guilty of bank fraud and tax evasion and not reporting his foreign bank accounts, of which he had 31 and did not report $60 million that funneled through it. A key thing they said is that the documents are the star witness of this case. They are saying that, Chris, because they expect in just a few minutes now for the defense to start their closing arguments and say, look, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for Rick Gates, Paul Manafort's business partner who testified against him. And he's not a credible witness. We see he has a secret life, he had an affair, he had a secret flat in London, and he embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from his boss, Paul Manafort. The prosecution is gearing up for that because they know that's what the defense is going to say. And they said, look, Rick Gates is not a Boy Scout. Paul Manafort wouldn't hire a Boy Scout. He wanted to hire someone who would participate in these criminal acts with him. But they went point by point, Chris, to show that it was Paul Manafort's fingerprints. It was him saying no 4 years in a row on tax forms, saying he had no foreign bank accounts. It isn't a matter of forgetting to check a box here and there. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it knowingly and willfully. So they laid all of that out. One key thing, though, Chris, I'm now starting to think we may not see this case go to the jury by the end of the day. I thought we were at the beginning of the day. I thought that would be the case. Now, timing-wise, it's a little up in the air because we took this long recess for lunch so that the defense can have their solid 2 hours. And then we're going to hear from the judge for about an hour and a half as he gives the jury instructions. So it's unclear if they would get that either at the end of the day today or early tomorrow morning. I just wanted to be clear on that as we move through.
Yeah, that's interesting, too. In the meantime, Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, suggested that Robert Mueller may be waiting for this verdict, hoping that it would give him more leverage moving forward. Let me play that.
Are you any closer to having a deal with Mueller to sit down?
No. Haven't heard from him in a week.
How do you interpret that?
I think they're waiting for the... I hate to bring up the case. I think they're waiting for the Manafort case. I think they feel if they win, they're going to be empowered. If they lose, and I don't know what, it doesn't have anything to do with us. We're trying to tell them. I don't care what happens to Manafort. The one thing that proves is you don't know anything about us.
Julia, is there anything you've seen or heard to suggest what Rudy Giuliani says is true?
So I think what's really important here is that, Giuliani does so much PR for Trump in this case against the special counsel. I think that we will see Trump's legal team seize on anything, even if Paul Manafort is only acquitted on a few counts. They could use that as a victory for Trump's legal team. There are 18 counts, and a lot of them have to do with some very complicated financial law. So it could be that they can't get unanimous consent on all of those 18 counts. But it seemed very clear and very persuasive from Greg Andres from the special counsel's office today as he laid everything out. Another thing I want to say, Chris, is that, if Trump is watching this, if he could be in this room right now, or Giuliani could be in the room I was just in and hear the prosecution go through so methodically, they might be afraid at just how much evidence and how thorough this special counsel's team is able to go. There is no stone left unturned here, and you can bet that they would use that same approach with each person, each subject of the Mueller probe.
Yeah, I don't think anybody who knew Robert Mueller would be surprised by what he just had to say about that closing. Julia Ainsley, now 25 minutes away from the other side getting to present its case. Thank you. We'll be checking in with you. We want to go now, though, to that devastating and sickening grand jury report detailing 7 decades of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church of Pennsylvania. The graphic, nearly 900-page report reveals that at least 300 Pennsylvania priests molested more than 1,000 children since the 1950s, and likely there are even more abusers and victims. The report details horrific instances of abuse, including a priest who raped a 7-year-old girl in the hospital after she got her tonsils out, and a ring of predatory priests who use whips, violence, and sadism in raping their victims, and exchanged young victims among themselves. The state attorney general calls the silencing of victims a weaponization of faith, and the cover-up by the church systematic. He presented a video giving the survivors an opportunity to share their stories. Here's a bit of that video.
They targeted me because I was fatherless.
We were taught, the priests and the nuns are God.
Just think, the word God makes me think of him, and I just...
Who would have believed me? A priest in 1948 or 47 would abuse you? Do that? Never heard of such a thing because they covered it up.
It doesn't ever go away. It has an effect on you for the rest of your life.
And I'm a survivor.
It's very lonely. Especially when it's your word against God's.
Much to talk about. Ann Thompson covers the Catholic Church for NBC News. Mike McDonald is a church abuse survivor. Danny Savalas, legal analyst for MSNBC, and Father Dave Dwyer, host of the Busted Halo show on Sirius XM. So, Mike, you're a leader of the Philadelphia chapter of the Survivors Network of those abused by priests. You know these stories well as your own. In fact, I'm sure all too well. What did it mean to you to hear the district attorney and to read this scathing and meticulously detailed report?
The Attorney General of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, has been tremendous to survivors and victims, and I want to say this, that he has been better to survivors and victims than any diocese in Pennsylvania. Hearing this report yesterday was vindication and validation for thousands of survivors across Pennsylvania. Hearing these stories once again is traumatic. It opens wounds. It is heartbreaking. I'm very familiar with the stories that are in these grand jury reports, certainly with the ones that occurred in Philadelphia in 2005 and 2011. An extremely emotional day. One of the survivors that I'm very, very friendly with referred it to be almost as if it was a funeral yesterday, as if they were burying an old, dark, secret spot in their life.
And this is not new. It's been 16 years, I think, since the Boston Globe started what became the spotlight investigation that won just about every award you can win in journalism. And yet, some of these tragic stories of abuse happened within the last 10 years, right?
Right. There are 2 priests. So the grand jury took a look at 7 decades of behavior in the Catholic Church. Most of those cases were too old for the statute of limitations in Pennsylvania. There were only cases against 2 priests that they have brought criminal charges against for sexually abusing children in the last 10 years. But what has changed since the Boston Globe spotlight reporting and blew this whole issue into a national scandal is that the bishops adopted something called a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to abusive priests. So if there's one credible claim, you are pulled from public ministry. And we saw that happen with Theodore McCarrick earlier this summer. He was the Cardinal of Washington. He was the Cardinal Emeritus at that point. He's resigned from the the College of Cardinals. So it's working in that sense. But I think what is so devastating is how it went on for years and years and years. And those thousand victims are all from church records. The church knew about these victims.
In fact, one of the things that they point out is there was a kind of playbook for how to deal with this. This wasn't something that one diocese decided how they were going to try to handle this, and they did a horrible job with it.
Apparently some Norwood were murdered. Not sure why I should care.
Don't talk about it as rape.
At long last, Windhelm was free. No longer must we suffer persecution at the hands of Ulfric Stormcloak.
Inappropriate contact. If you feel the need to
drink for the thirsty, food for the hungry.
Remove him, but don't tell the parishioners why you took him out. And most of all, don't go to the police. That was the playbook.
Mike, you were 11. You were abused by 2 priests for 2 years. Tell us how this impacted your life.
The longest journey I've ever been on. I suffered addiction from a person able to help me now. Extremely grateful for that. Extremely grateful for the fellowship of people that helped me survive this journey of extremely difficult. I have 2 marriages. I've lost a home. I've lost several jobs. I put my family through hell. This is collateral damage. And for so long, I hid what was going on inside of me. There was a volcano that was going
Let's sake that
at any moment. And friends, family, died. I hid because I didn't want to let you in. I didn't want to let you in on the deepest, darkest secret that I had been holding since age 11. It wouldn't be until age 35 when I even started to let just a little bit of it out.
If you need another drink, I'll be right here.
About these abuses than the dioceses themselves. And, you know, just going back a little bit, they talk about minimizing and finding what is actually a credible account. So one of my cases, the Reverend John Kishner was
the cold of Skyrim that gets to me. The stink from the people.
My case with him was found as not credible. Although the Archdiocese
when I've made enough money, I'm going to return to Morrowind in High Star.
Exposed body at his Jersey Shore home. The diocese deemed that as not a credible account. This is absurd. These people they're maniacal.
And you mentioned this happened at 11. It was 24 years later, when you were 35, that you were able to finally talk about this. Danny, that brings us to something that is heartbreaking, that there will be no legal justice for many of these victims because the statute of limitations has run out. One of the things this grand jury said very clearly in this report is that has to change. How difficult could that be?
To change the statute of limitations, well, statutes of limitations vary from state to state, but Pennsylvania, where I practice, you have until you're 30 to file a civil claim and until you're 50 for there to be a criminal case if you were abused as a minor, and that means before you were 18. But the growing trend with statutes of limitations in sex cases is to expand them, and that's fine. If we do, though, we have to recognize that that's tantamount to a statement that if you can file a civil case when you're 60, when you're 65 years old against an abuser, then the evidence is necessarily going to be more questionable, which I think is reflecting society's view that, generally speaking, if someone accuses a priest of abuse, then generally it's true. I mean, there's no other conclusion to be drawn from expanding a statute of limitations to a level, to a degree, where the evidence will almost necessarily be of questionable credibility because it's just so old.
And I assume, Mike, you would support expanding statutes of limitation?
So interesting, because there's a second abuser in my case, and yes, I'm outside the statute of limitations. The second abuser in my case, it was found credible. But in both cases, they are outside the statute of limitations. I would support a retroactive look-back window. Absolutely, 100%. In the House, the State House of Pennsylvania, in 2016, they did pass a look back window. However, the Senate stripped it, and we know why the Senate stripped it. They stripped it because the Catholic Conference and the lobbyists and the insurance industry got involved. It came down to the almighty dollar. How much is your child worth?
That's a horrifying question to even ponder. So, Father, yeah, I mean, I'll just be honest. He walked in today and I said, watch out, because I'm on a tear. A lifelong Catholic. How could this happen? How did this go on and on and on and on? And I don't even want to hear
Apparently,
the
some
excuse that
women
we
were
thought of
murdered.
things differently
Not sure
in the
why I
50s
should
and
care.
60s and 70s. People knew rape was wrong. People knew asking little kids to take their clothes off in front of an adult was wrong.
No longer must we suffer persecution at the
Yes,
hands
maybe
of Ulfric
our
Stormcloak.
view of the way we punish these things is different, but we knew that these priests
The cold of Skyrim that gets to me. It's the stink from the people.
And people were complicit in allowing it to continue to happen. I mean, legally, certainly people who kind of look the other way.
God made enough money. I'm going to
It's
return to
horrifying.
Morrowind and
What
hard
does
start.
Pope Francis do? Look, especially here in the United States, there is so much goodwill toward him for the way that he has been open
Yes,
in a
there
lot
are.
of ways that the church has not seemed to be open to many American Catholics. He's going to Ireland, right, and next week?
Yes.
This is a place that has had its own sex abuse scandal. What does he have to say? What should he say to a lot of, I think, good, faithful Catholics who are questioning their church right now and their membership in this church?
He needs to, with his authority, and he is really the only one. This is kind of a factor of the canon law and how the church is set up, and he's the only one to whom bishops are accountable. There's no intermediary authority, no matter how much you slice it. It has to be his word to say we need to bring what is in darkness into light, because that's what's happening. That's what happened in this grand jury.
I just want it to be into light, because it took the grand jury to bring it into light. I want to know, what are you going to do to these priests? Are you just going to let them retire? Are you going to continue to support them financially? You know, we excommunicate, which for people who aren't Catholics, that's the highest level of punishment. We kick you out. We would kick you out if you violated the sanctity of confession. But we don't kick you out necessarily if you violate a child.
Absolutely. Those are things that we absolutely need to change, that we need to put at the same level of horrificness, the kind of sins and crimes in many cases that clergy and bishops have done, not just the abusers themselves, but those who have been able.
What are you hearing, Anne? Are we going to hear from Pope Francis on this?
We have not today. He had his weekly audience in St. Peter's Square. He prayed for the victims of the Genoa bridge collapse. He did not say anything about the victims in Pennsylvania. And we asked the Vatican for comment, and they said no comment so far.
Mike, we are
very disappointed.
We are out of time, but what would you like to hear from Pope Francis? Is there something he can do for you and for the thousands of other victims that can at least help with the healing process?
Sure, he can order the nuncio in the United States to order all Catholic cardinals and bishops in the United States to support reformation, to support statute of limitations reformation, so that victims can restore their lives.
Mike McDonald, thank you for your bravery and the work that your group has done. Ann Thompson has been reporting on this from the beginning. Danny Savalos, Father Jim Dwyer, Busted Halo Show. Thank you all. We've got a lot more to get to this hour. The White House has just announced that press briefing. It's set to start, about 45 minutes from now. We'll keep an eye on the briefing room. And that comes as people inside the White House are reportedly terrified. New reports show us the battle plan to handle former staffer Omarosa.
Apparently, some Nord women were murdered.
Twitter puts new
Not sure
restrictions
why I
on
should care.
InfoWars founder Alex Jones. After intense public pressure, the CEO tells NBC's Lester Holt why the company made this decision. I got to tell you, the section we're going to play you in this exclusive interview is fascinating. Stay tuned.
Let's begin.
It's not the cold of Skyrim that gets to me. It's the stink from the people.
Across web and tablet. You want $4.95 commissions for stocks, 50-cent options contracts, $1.50.
Nod made enough money. I'm going to return to Morrowind and hard start.
Did you say yes? Good. Then it's time for Powered E-Trade, the platform price and service that gives you the
Yes, there are.
Looks like we have a couple of seconds left. Let's do some card twirling. Twirling cards. E-Trade, the original place to invest online. I was looking for somebody who wanted to find love at eHarmony. We
We ask you questions so that we can match you for a lasting connection.
I found my person.
I really found my true love on eHarmony. eHarmony.com, the #1 trusted dating site. Start for free today.
Do you have a life insurance policy you no longer need or can't afford? Now you can sell your policy for an immediate payment.
We bought life insurance when our kids were young, to protect their future.
Our youngest just turned 40. We no longer needed the coverage.
That got us to thinking about letting our policy go. So we did some research and called Coventry Direct. I learned that you can sell all or part of a life insurance policy, even a term life policy. Turns out, people have been selling policies like ours for the past 15 years. Who knew? We sold our policy. Now we have money to help with the medical bills.
And to add to our retirement.
If you have $100,000 or more of life insurance, you may be a candidate to sell your policy. Call 1-800-461-2600 or visit CoventryDirect.com. 1-800-461-2600.
You need another drink? I'll be right here.
Redefining insurance.
With the new Chasing Business Unlimited card, I get unlimited 1.5% cash back. It's so simple, I don't even have to think about it. So I think about mouthfeel.
Introducing Chasing Business Unlimited with unlimited 1.5% cash back on every purchase.
Every remaining 2018 in stock must be sold during our bottom line year-end model sale at Team Nissan. Like the award-winning 2018 Nissan Sentra.
Económica.
Just $14,988. Or save big on the fierce Nissan Titan truck. Bottom line, $1,000 off. It's the bottom line year-end model sale at the global award-winning best of the best Team Nissan. Rush Team Nissan now.
Some believe if it's not cheap, it's not luxury performance. So we brought these Infinity SUVs to Germany with American families to drive them.
This is the track going for German luxury outdoor. Look for family or SUV.
You see, Joe, it's 2 engines in one. How did Germany not do that first?
During the Start Your Own Legacy sales event, lease the Infinity Q50 Sports Sedan for $279 a month, or finance at 0.9% APR at your Southern California Infinity retailer.
Morning Joe speaks truth to power. He's destroying the Republican Party for years to come with access to the people who matter.
Step up. It's not about your dad. It's about the country.
Why is there more of a sense of urgency about Puerto Rico over office?
You can't be a counselor to the president and not comment.
Every hallway in the Beltway. I said America will be strong. We will survive this. Morning Joe, day 69 on MSNBC.
Twitter has suspended the account of conspiracy theorist Alex Jones for a week. Twitter says Jones violated its policy by tweeting a link to a video telling his listeners to get battle rifles ready against the media and others. Now, Apple, Facebook, and other social media companies had already banned Jones from their sites over the past couple of weeks. This Twitter ban affects his personal account, not the InfoWars site founded by Jones. After the ban, Jones tweeted on InfoWars, "Real Alex Jones is now in Twitter prison." NBC's Joe Kent has been following this story. So Lester Holt sat down. He asked the Twitter CEO, Jack Dorsey, about Alex Jones's decision. Here's the Alex Jones decision. Let me play what that exchange was.
Alex Jones on Twitter posted this week what essentially is a video calling for people to get their battle rifles ready against the media, saying it's time to act, it's got to be done now, move criminally against people. Sent a chill up my spine. How about yours?
It did. I mean, there's a number of actions that we believe help a call to incitement to violence, and those are the things that we need to make sure that we're taking action on.
You've taken action against him in this instance. What is it? Can you tell us what it is?
I believe we put him in a timeout, removing his ability to tweet for a time period.
A timeout seems minor compared to the implications of someone suggesting a call to arms against a particular group, in this case, the media. How do you respond to that?
Well, I feel, any suspension, whether it be a permanent one or a temporary one, makes someone think about their actions and their behaviors. And
think Alex Jones is going to change his behavior based on a timeout?
I don't know. We have found that it does have the potential to change, impact, and change behavior. So whether it works within this case to change some of those behaviors and change some of those actions, I don't know. But this is consistent with how we enforce.
Wow. I mean, I wonder if Dorsey wants that timeout phrase back. This is not a 3-year-old who has been having a temper tantrum and gets sent to his room. This is somebody who is, in his own words, inciting violence. Do you think that was a missed opportunity there, potentially?
It looks like Jack Dorsey is trying to figure out when exactly to fully suspend Alex Jones here, but because what we saw last night, the news we reported, is that Alex Jones' account continues, as you mentioned, to exist, but he's not able to retweet or tweet for the next 7 days.
But InfoWars can.
That's right, exactly. And so Twitter has long been a place where they have been very focused on keeping the open public square open. And what is also interesting from Lester's interview is he asked if people with large followings in the case of President Trump, Alex Jones, and many other celebrities out there are being held to a higher standard because of the voice that they have out there.
Yeah, if you've got 10 followers
yeah.
and you make a call to incite violence, it's different than if you have a million, or I don't even know how many does he have, how many followers, so, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
Exactly, about 1 million followers out there right now, and Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, telling Lester that they do have a public interest clause in their rules to hold some of these people with a big platform to a higher standard, but here they seem to be moving very, very gingerly, as if there is something else going on. But Twitter has long also been known as a company, as I've covered them, not to follow what Facebook or Apple or Google do. And they are definitely doubling down on that because a lot of the bans happened well over a week ago.
Yeah, it's a fascinating interview that Lester did, and I think it's opening up a really important conversation. Look, you know, we're in the media. We believe in free speech, obviously. The question is, when does that turn into something else? Jolene Kent, thank you so much.
Sure.
And we are watching the White House press briefing room. Yes, once again, Sarah Sanders expected to walk up to the podium. It's scheduled for 1 o'clock Eastern time, so a little more than half an hour from now. This follows explosive new reporting out today that takes us inside the White House to show us how people are reacting to Omarosa's revelations.
The topics we cover on MSNBC every day, they're driven by big ideas, big themes, huge societal changes. And that's what we talk about on our new podcast. It's called Why Is This Happening?
Why Is This Happening? With Chris Hayes. New episodes every Tuesday.
I've been making blades here at Gillette for 20 years. I'll bet I'm the first blade maker you've ever met. There's a lot of innovation that goes into making our thinnest, longest-lasting blades on the market. Precision machinery and high-quality materials from around the world. Nobody else even comes close. It's about delivering a more comfortable shave every time. Invented in Boston, made and sold around the world. Order now at GilletteOnDemand.com. Gillette, the best a man can get.
This is Casper, the company bringing bedtime back to millions of happy sleepers. Try America's #1 rated mattress brand for 100 nights, risk-free. Unbox better sleep at Casper.com.
Duncan just protected his family with a $500,000 life insurance policy. How much do you think it cost him? $100 a month? $75? $50? Actually, Duncan got his $500,000
Apparently some Nord women were murdered.
$28 a month.
Not sure why I should
Less than
care.
$1 a day. His secret? Select Quote. In just minutes, a Select Quote agent will compare
Long last
shop
wind
nearly a
hill
dozen
spring.
highly rated
No
life
longer must we
insurance
suffer
companies and
persecution
give
at the
you a
hands of
choice
Ulfric
of your 5
Stormcloak.
best rates. Duncan's wife Cassie got a $750,000 policy for under $23 a
Not the
month.
cold of Skyrim
Give
that
your
gets to me.
family the
It's
security
the
it
stink from the
needs
people.
at a price you can afford.
When Ulfric
Since
was killed,
1985,
justice was
Select Quote
done.
has saved over a
Might
million
sound
families
harsh, but
millions
it's how
of
I
dollars on
feel.
life insurance.
I'm going to
Call
return
now.
tomorrow with
800
hard start.
932-5400 or visit SelectQuote.com. Discover what over a million families know now.
Yes, sirrah.
We shop, you save.
Here's the thing. 52% of guys experience erectile dysfunction, but 0% like talking about it. That's why we built Roman. For the first time ever, you can get ED meds prescribed online, shipped discreetly to your door. Chat online with U.S. licensed physicians.
Yes, sirrah.
And get FDA-approved medication, all in single-dose packaging. No more waiting rooms,
Yes,
offer
sirrah.
talks, or lines at the pharmacy. Get your first month free at GetRoman.com/TV.
I don't keep track of regrets, and I don't add up the years, but what I do count on is Boost.
Delicious Boost High Protein
And what might you need?
now has 33% more protein, along with 26 essential vitamins and minerals. Boost High Protein. Be up for life.
We've got exciting news at North Hollywood Toyota. We've teamed up with Kelly Blue Book, and we're now your trade-in headquarters. Get an instant cash or trade-in offer based on Kelly Blue Book values. Right inside our
Gray Quarter would be a haven for my kind.
You said it's great.
I was wrong.
Get an instant Kelly Blue Book quote online today at NorthHollywoodToyota.com.
So trade in your car today and drive away in a brand new Toyota. North Hollywood Toyota. Let's go, please. 93 longer days. 93 warmer nights. Summer is here. 134,000 minutes of windows down and music up. 8 million seconds to feel summer on.
Make the most of it in the new BMW. During the BMW Summer On sales event, receive a credit of up to $3,000 in select models.
The administration just announced there will be a press briefing at 2 Eastern Time today. Yesterday's briefing focused intensely on Omarosa's claim about her former colleagues. And today, reports that White House staffers are terrified of what Omarosa, Manacle, Newman might have on them. Politico says that Trump staffers, quote, live in fear of Omarosa's next tape. In particular, whether that next tape might be from his days on The Apprentice. Now, of course, Trump says he has never used the N-word, but when asked if such a long rumored tape actually does exist, members of Trump world demur.
I've never heard the president use any type of racist words ever, and I've never had a conversation with him about.
When Ulfric was killed, justice was done. It might sound harsh, but it's how I feel.
Never hear Donald Trump utter the N-word on a recording in any context. I can't guarantee anything, but I can tell you that the president addressed this question directly. I can tell you that I've never heard it.
As always, Kristen Walker asking exactly the right question. For more, let's bring in Ashley Parker, White House reporter for The Washington Post, and Matt Welch, editor-at-large for Reason Magazine. So, Matt, Ashley has some problems with hearing us, so let's start here.
Apparently, some Nord women were murdered.
One former Trump advisor said he already assumed every conversation he was having in the White House was being recorded in some fashion, and went so far as to purchase a Faraday box, which blocks electromagnetic fields
Stormcloak.
to store his government phone. Two things. One,
it's not the cold of Skyrim that gets to me. It's the stink from the people.
Two, does it look like the deep state exists and the Trump White House hired it?
I mean, I've made enough money. I'm going to return to Morrowind and high star.
Ham-handedly trying to tape one another or threaten each other with the existence of tapes more than we'll see necessarily.
And what might you need?
John Brennan and somebody in a closet getting all the secret tapes from inside the White House. This has been a gang of kind of B-level, C-level non-stars who've been part of this. Actually, they are stars of reality television in some cases, but people who are not ready for prime time for politics up until now. And so it's not a surprise that they act in ways that kind of defy description, that traduce normal rates of professional behavior here. And it's not surprising that they're freaked out right now. There's the fact that there's tape of such good audio coming out of the White House is definitely raising some hackles. I think that people have an unreasonable expectation that there will be some tape someday that'll be the thing that drives away Donald Trump. I don't think that the world is going to work exactly like that, but you can also see the flop sweat on the president and the people around him when they discuss whether there's tapes that might be in the hands of Mark Burnett.
Do you have one of those little devices that blocks, or do you have a device right now? Ashley, I understand you're back with us. I want to play for you what Omarosa said last night on The Daily Show about this fight she's in with the White House.
Trevor, I would say this. If you see me in a fight with a bear, pray for the bear.
So, you've written about this subject today. The headline is, he created Omarosa, how Trump's protege turned his tactics against him. Is the mentor being outplayed by his apprentice?
Apparently, some Nord women were
He's
murdered.
certainly being
Not
matched
sure
by
why I
his
should care.
apprentice. And in some ways, the president created her. In some ways, when he first met Omarosa in 2004 on
At
The
long
Apprentice,
last, Windhelm
she
was
was sort
free.
of a fully
No longer
formed
must we suffer
creation, and he sort
persecution
of
at the hands of
elevated her
Ulfric
and
Stormcloak.
enabled her. And at that moment, was actually kind of fascinated and impressed by her. And it's only now that
cold
she's
of
turned
Skyrim that
against
gets
him
to
that
me.
he's not
It's the stink
particularly
from the
happy
people.
about it.
Matt, things have gotten so bad that Sarah Sanders actually apologized for something. This is the tweet
When I've
she
made
sent
enough money,
after
I'm going to
wrongly
return
stating that
tomorrow
Trump
in
created
the
more
high
jobs for
star.
African Americans than President Obama did. Here are the facts. The
When
White House
Ulfric was
originally claimed
killed,
Trump created
justice was
700,000
done.
jobs, and
Might
Obama
sound
created
harsh,
only
but it's how I feel.
195,000 for African Americans. Well, actually, Obama created 3 million jobs.
And what might you need?
It's just one bad thing after another. But this apology or correction, if you want to call it that, is it just another diversion? I mean, with all the false claims that are made by this administration and behind that podium, why correct this one?
Need something.
Glad to see that she did and welcome. And of course, the original mistake is to say that a president creates jobs. A president does not create jobs. But it's good that she did. Part of the reason why this came from the Council of Economic Advisors, which is on some level more embarrassing than if it had come from the president or even Sarah Huckabee Sanders. That is supposed to be a body that produces reliable economic information. This was a crude mistake of not measuring exactly when a president takes office and leaves office. So we can welcome this. I wish it didn't also come with the next line, which is that, and I'm not going to apologize.
Apparently, some Nord women were murdered. Not sure why I should care.
And in fact, they have been members of the administration and supporters of the president have regularly, over the last 24 hours, defended his use of the word dog. Let me play some of that for you, how the White House responded.
To try and claim he's racist because he uses the word like dog when he's called more men dogs than he has women, and all those men are white. It's just insane.
I think that he has made a number of comments about plenty of people, and to try to single that out to one group is frankly silly, because I think if you did a comparison, he's probably got a lot more nasty things out there about some other people.
So their defense, Ashley, is that the president says a lot of nasty things about a lot of people?
Yeah, that is their defense. It's sort of an up against the wall defense that, they're sort of public saying, look, he can kind of be a nasty guy. He can kind of say rude and offensive things, and there's not one group he's gearing them towards. We actually did a whole article on how canine put-downs are among the president's favorite. Although there is a fair point that, especially when he is criticizing African Americans, that there is certain language that he seems to use most frequently, specifically towards them, including saying low intelligence, not very smart, kind of dumb, always going to their intelligence. And that, while I'm sure there are examples where he has been critical of other people who are not black in those terms, recently it has largely been focused on African Americans he is fighting with and at war with, and not other people.
We're out of time, but I just want to point out one thing that our crack staff has sort of highlighted. It happened earlier this morning on Fox and Friends, which is a show that we know that the president watches, and Brian Kilmeade said of Omarosa, seems to have outsmarted the president, who has taken the bait. It'd be interesting to know if he heard Brian Kilmeade say that this morning. Matt Welch, Ashley Parker, thanks to both of you. For or against Trump? The latest signal to Republicans running for office in the midterms: either get in line or face the consequences at the ballot box. And the White House press briefing now, a little more than 20 minutes away. Yesterday's was full of fireworks. The White House defending itself against Omarosa. And Sarah Sanders not guaranteeing the president has never said the N-word on tape. What will today bring us? Stay tuned to find out.
George woke up in pain, but he has plans today, so he took a leave this morning. If he'd taken Tylenol, he'd be stopping for more pills right now. Only Aleve has the strength to stop tough pain for up to 12 hours with just one pill. Tylenol can't do that. Aleve. All day strong, all day long. Now introducing Aleve back and muscle pain for up to 12 hours of pain relief with just one pill.
How do you win in business? Stay at La Quinta, where we're changing with contemporary makeovers. Then use the
to learn about their Medicare options before they're on Medicare.
Come on in. You're turning 65 soon? Yeah. And you're retiring at 67?
Apparently, some Nord women were murdered.
Right place.
Not sure
It's
why I
also
should
a
care.
great time to learn about an AARP Medicare Supplement insurance plan, insured by United Healthcare Insurance Company.
At long last,
Here's
women
why.
is free.
Medicare Part
No
B
longer must
doesn't
we suffer
pay for
persecution
everything.
at the
Only
hands of
about
the storm.
80% of your medical costs.
This part is up to you. Yeah, everyone's a little surprised to learn that.
The cold of Skyrim that gets to me. It's the stink of people.
Medicare doesn't. That could help cut down on those out-of-your-pocket medical costs. Call United Healthcare Insurance Company today
I'm going to return tomorrow with hard start.
decision guide and learn about the only Medicare supplement plans endorsed by AARP, selected for meeting their high standards of quality and service. This type of plan lets you say yes to any doctor or hospital that accepts Medicare patients. There are no networks or referrals.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks so much.
Do you accept Medicare patients?
I sure do.
When Ulfric was killed, justice was done. That might sound harsh, but it's
Like
how
to travel?
I feel.
This kind of plan goes with you anywhere you travel in the country.
So go ahead. Spend winter somewhere warm.
If you're turning 65 soon or over 65 and planning your... Find out more about the plans that live up to their name.
Thumbs up to that.
Remember, the time to prepare is before you go on Medicare.
Don't wait. Get started today.
Call United Healthcare and ask for your free decision guide. Learn more about AARP Medicare Supplement Plan options and rates to fit your needs.
Oh, and happy birthday. Or retirement in advance.
So you have your headphones, chair, your laptop, 24/7 tech support.
Yep, these guys. I think he might need some support.
Yes. Start them off right with the school supplies they need. Low prices all summer long. Like these for only 25 cents at Office Depot Office Max.
So today we have two pretty clear takeaways from Tuesday's primaries. If you're a Republican, don't be critical of President Trump. Democrats, well, voters are looking for diversity. 4 states held primaries yesterday: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Connecticut, and Vermont. And in a stunning upset, Minnesota's former Republican governor, Tim Pawlenty, lost his bid to get his old job back. Didn't even keep it close against Jeff Johnson. Pawlenty had criticized Trump in 2016, calling him, quote, unhinged and unfit to be president. Let's bring in David Jolly, former Republican congressman from Florida. E.J. Dionne is the Washington Post columnist, senior fellow of governance studies at the Brookings Institution, and an MSNBC contributor. So, David, the Trump effect. The president this morning posted not 1, not 2, but 9 tweets congratulating Republicans, including this one to Johnson for what he called a big night against a very strong and well-known opponent. True. Thanks for all of the support you showed me. You have my complete and total endorsement. Johnson beat Tim Pawlenty by more than 66,000 votes, nearly 9 percentage points. Even though the pre-election polling showed Pawlenty with a lead, does this leave any doubt in your mind that the Republican Party is now the party of Trump?
No, absolutely not. This is Donald Trump's Republican Party, and what we have seen during primary season, and that's very important, primary season, is Donald Trump's touch. He has the Midas touch in Republican primaries across the country, without question. But, Chris, we also have to look at the special elections we've had for congressional seats since Trump got elected, where they have more of a general election flair. That's where we are seeing Democratic voter turnout up, underperformance by Republicans, and none of those races have actually occurred in truly competitive districts. So it means going into November, these competitive districts are going to be very hard for Trump Republicans to hold or to win.
It did seem, though, E.J., that Pawlenty recognized sort of the lay of the land in the primaries. He tried to distance himself from those 2016 comments. I want to take a little trip back. This is a debate between the two contenders earlier in the month, and Johnson is the one on the left.
People not to go, you called it difference. And I said, and now he's your hero. And so, and I appreciate and respect what he's doing as well. But to put the full record on, I voted for President Trump. But you thought he was unfit to be president. And I just reacted to the Access Hollywood tapes. You know, you calling him a jackass is better than me calling him, you know, unhinged. I mean, I have a question. Come on, Jeff.
So, generally, EJ, do you think you criticize President Trump as a Republican at your own peril, or is David right? It may actually come back to bite you in the general.
Well, you know, it's sort of sad to watch that debate because Tripoliti was a pretty principled guy over time. He was an interesting candidate, and here he said that what Donald Trump said in that Access Hollywood interview was basically disgusting. I think most Trump supporters believed at the time that that was disgusting. And now, Republicans basically have to debase themselves to win primaries. You can't even really just say, well, what I said was true about Donald Trump. And I think, as David suggested, this is a real problem for the Republicans going forward. Because on the one hand, you've got to be down the line with Trump in the primaries, but it's leading the party to nominate candidates who are well to the right of wherever the middle of the electorate is. Chris Kobach, his victory was confirmed in Kansas yesterday in a very close race. And that race suddenly moved in Charlie Cook's ratings from leading Republican to toss-up. So they are nominating candidates who are less electable because the Trump base is insisting on absolute loyalty. And I think they're going to have second thoughts about that after November.
Yeah, the other thing that struck me is that turnout was high for Democrats last night in all 4 primary states. And I'd like to get a quick comment from both of you. Is that concerning, David, for Republicans in November, or can you not necessarily read anything from these primaries into what might happen?
Need something?
No, I think Republicans are looking at a white ground in November specifically because of that. Energy and numbers are on the Democratic side. And to EJ's point, people are looking at down-ballot Republicans and saying, you know what? You've sold your soul. This is a failure of your own personal integrity, a failure of your own personal mettle, a failure of political leadership. If you were with Trump all along, God bless you. I disagree with you. A lot of people do, but that's fine. But they're looking at Republicans who sold out to the cult of personality with Donald Trump, and they've lost faith in those Republicans going into November.
What's motivating the Democratic vote, do you think, EJ? Is it Donald Trump, or is it, and I just want to mention really quickly a couple of things we saw that were Vermont Democrats for governor, nominated first ever transgender for a major party for a governorship. You had a teacher, Johanna Hayes, who could become the first African-American Democrat to represent the state in Congress. We saw Keith Ellison become the first Muslim who could become the first Muslim Attorney General in the country in spite of his controversy. What's your takeaway, Jay, on the Democratic side? We only have a few seconds.
Well, I think you saw 2 things yesterday. You saw that indeed the Democratic Party is the more diverse party, and these candidates all prevailed. You, at the same time, in a lot of races, saw pretty mainstream, middle-of-the-road candidates win. You know, Tony Evers in Wisconsin for governor, Tim Walz, a congressman in Minnesota. So 2 things are happening at the same time. There is an assertion of all of the groups in the Democratic Party who are part of the whole country. And also a lot of Democrats who are saying in other races, we're going to make a pragmatic choice. And I think that combination is not a contradiction. That's what the Democrats are counting on to win. High turnout among strong Democrats and a diverse base, but an appeal to middle-of-the-road voters who are kind of sick of Trump.
EJ, David, great conversation. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. And we will be going live to the White House. Press briefing scheduled to start soon, a day after Sarah Sanders apologized for getting something factually wrong. How will things go today?
Be sure to stop by Sadri's used wares in Drakewell.
I wanted to thank you again
Why
for
would
the
you
nice
go out of
buys.
your way to wander around a warehouse for paint when you can just swing by your local Ace?
I've been a bit out of sorts
paint
since...
like one-coat coverage Valspar can match any color and mixes it with something that's hard to
something
find.
for just about everybody in here.
Service.
Give a holler if you have any questions.
If anyone is going to go out
Not really sure what to do with myself anymore. I just miss her so much.
If it ever takes more than one trip to complete your paint project, we'll bring you what you need, and delivery is free. Ace is the place with
I try not to think of her, but no mother should have to bury her daughter.
An identity stolen every 2 seconds. See if
Good day. So, you're interested in my potions and ingredients?
At Experian.com/scan.
It's Nutrisystem's Red Hot Sale. Celebrate summer and save 40% off every program, including Turbo 13. Lose up to 13 pounds and 7 inches overall in your first month. Lose weight now. Money back guaranteed.
I'm Marie and I lost 50 pounds.
with Nutrisystem. I am so much healthier now.
Nutrisystem delivers your favorite foods made healthier, perfectly portioned to fuel and satisfy.
Count, measure, meeting, not with Nutrisystem.
Order your 28-day program right now and we'll rush you Turbo 13 with the new Turbo Takeoff Week with new foods. Plus a week of probiotic and delicious Turbo Shakes free to shrink your belly and lose weight.
You'll see results your very first week.
For a limited time, save 40% off every program.
I better get
Nutrisystem
going.
works.
Do it. Do it now. Don't wait.
Go online or call 888-455-DIET and get shakes free, plus 40% off every program.
When it's time to sell your home, one wrong move can cost a lot of money. You need a real estate agent who will do things right. Sell your home fast and at a great price. Introducing HomeLight, a breakthrough new way to sell your home. HomeLight has detailed stats on the top agents and home sales in your neighborhood, so you know you're getting the best agent for your needs. Thousands use HomeLight to find experienced agents they can trust to sell their homes faster and for more money. Go to HomeLight.com today.
Hey, Todd. Hey, well, so I think I got to get my roof repaired. You know anybody?
Yeah, actually I might.
Great. Get me some additional quotes. Research the average price for the job in this area and book the job for 2 weeks from now. On Wednesday. No, wait. Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday's better.
You can't expect your neighbors to do everything Home Advisor can. So to find and instantly book a top-rated home pro for free, just ask Home Advisor. This is not a bed. It's a revolution in sleep. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed from $9.99 intelligently senses your movement and automatically adjusts on each side to keep you both comfortable. And snoring? How smart is that? Smarter sleep to help you lose your dad walk. Train for that marathon? Wake up with the patience of a saint. And now, save up to $500 on select Sleep Number 360 Smart Beds. Plus, no interest until January 2021. Ends Wednesday.
Bug bites, itchy rash, stop your scratching, stop your scratching.
Relief starts now. Cold burn rapid relief. 2 extra medicines instantly relieve bug bites and all kinds of summer itches, so you can get back to fun. Goldbond relief starts now.
We have breaking news on the president's legal battle.
Breaking the surface of the story.
We're getting a first look at images of girls who have been separated from their parents.
The only way to uncover the whole story is to dig deeper than anyone else.
Pretty last-minute addition to the official White House schedule, the press briefing beginning in just a few moments. President Trump's communications team has had some difficulties answering the questions that have been brought about by this new memoir from former aide Omarosa Manigault-Newman. Chiefly, whether there really is a tape of the president saying the N-word. The White House pushback has gotten so flummoxed it's issued a rare correction after Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said this in her response to my colleague Kristen Welker yesterday.
This president, since he took office in the year and a half that he's been here, has created 700,000 new jobs for African Americans. When President Obama left after 8 years in office, he had only created 195,000 jobs for African Americans. President Trump, in his first year and a half, has already tripled what President Obama did in 8 years.
So just a correction, far more jobs were created for African Americans under President Obama than under President Trump. We've got NBC Hans Nichols at the White House, so key us up. What are we expecting in that briefing room in a few minutes?
Well, Chris, as you well know, that briefing room can get quite contentious, and I think we can expect that in just a few minutes here at the White House. Namely, that Sarah Huckabee Sanders had an opportunity to go to the president and ask him if he used that word, if there's any tape of it. She couldn't guarantee it yesterday. Can she guarantee it today? And there's an easy out for the White House here, and that is simply for the White House to call on the producer, the owner of those tapes, to release those tapes and clarify this record once and for all. So you can expect a lot of questions on that, a whole host of questions on what's happening with the Manafort trial, what the back and forth is in terms of the next steps, what the president is going to say, what Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to say, and then there are a whole other host of international issues in China. So we have seen Sanders more this month than last already. They've done 4 press briefings. I shouldn't say all 4 already, like that's a big deal. We're midway through August, and there's only been 4 briefings. In July, though, Chris, only 3.
Yeah, normally we only in the Obama White House one have a briefing traveling to get here. Something like that. We've got only 30 seconds left, but there is a question from the press corps
sure that they actually issue the correction on the African-American jobs, because this is not a White House at any level that is known to back down on anything they say.
Well, Chris, it was certainly rare, as you will point out, that this is not something the White House likes to do, is admit to having some false statements from the White House. In this case, they did do it. They issued what they're calling for the clarification, and it's clear they got their numbers wrong, but not just their numbers, their overall point was an odd basis. Chris?
Nichols, thank you very much for that. We'll be right back. negotiations don't bear fruit soon. And don't forget Michael Cohen. He's still twisting in the wind. The president's former personal attorney, well, it's been months since the SDNY raided his office and his homes, but there's still no indictment. Is he trying to negotiate a deal with the SDNY? Maybe Robert Mueller. He certainly signaled as much. So our big question is, can the president run the country and deal with all the chaos in the White House and his wife at the same time? NBC News White House correspondent Chris White House reporter for the LA Times, Eli Stoffel, is with us as well, along with political reporter for the New York Times, Nick Constantine, and staff writer for the Atlantic, Natasha Bertrand. Thank you for being political analyst. And Dr. Kristen, these are a lot of controversies. There are a lot of, dramas is not the right word for them because there's real stakes involved here. The president is tweeting a ton about Omarosa and her book, tweeting about the witch hunt, as he calls it, the Russia investigation. Lindsey Graham said the other day that he's talked about it, mentioned it 20 times at least while they were on the golf course. Is he able to keep his focus on running the country and all of this other stuff? Is there worry in the West Wing that he's not headed where it should be?
He is, Katie, and I think that is the central question. You have a number of advisors who said, look, ignore this controversy, let it die out on its own accord, and that is not the tactic that we're seeing this president take. As you mapped out, the president has been lashing out on as a dog, and then that sparked a second controversy in addition to all of these revelations that we're learning about from these tapes. And then, of course, the other big question that we tried to get to in this briefing from yesterday, President Trump, when he was the Edward, Sarah Sanders saying that she was referring to the president's statement in which he denied this, saying that she hadn't had a chance to ask him herself. Has she at that point? That's one of the critical questions on our minds. There's no doubt, Katie, that this is looming large over this administration. Now, the president doesn't have any public events on his schedule today, but he is undoubtedly faced with a number of issues, controversies, crises on the international stage that demand his attention as commander-in-chief. This controversy clearly taking up at least some of his attention as well. So we await to hear from Sarah Sanders about all of that, and follow up with her on that fantastic interview that you did with Omarosa yesterday, in which we learned that Omarosa claims that she met with Special Counsel Robert Mueller and that President Trump knew about the Clinton campaign emails that were stolen and hacked and released by WikiLeaks beforehand. Now, the stroke remember so we'll get Sarah Sanders to weigh in again.
She did not give me any evidence for that, but I can tell you that I called one of her lawyers today, and her lawyer confirmed that she had sat down with the special counsel. I know there were questions about whether or not that was true. Her lawyer now confirms it with me as well. But in talking about these tapes that Omarosa has, the reason why people could be so nervous about it and wondering what could come next is
Winterhold will be back on its feet.
A woman who now works on the 2020 campaign, worked on the 2016 campaign. Omarosa on Monday, Christina Pearson was on Fox News saying she never had a conversation with a specialist about Donald Trump using the N-word. On Tuesday, Omarosa released the tape with Katrina Pearson on a call discussing the president's use of the N-word and saying that he said it. He's just embarrassed by it. And on Wednesday, she went back on Fox News where she originally denied that she had nothing to do with that conversation, never had it, and tried to clean things up. Let's watch.
You're now today there were two different phone calls. We were talking about one with Jason Miller.
I'm not claiming that. I claim that
you said it.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is not what we were talking about. That is not the question that you were asking me.
And Kristen, if you're still with us, Politico is reporting that people are terrified in the White House by what Omarosa might next reveal. They're likening it to the same type of psychological warfare that the Clinton campaign emails did to the Clinton campaign.
I never would have believed it. I hadn't seen it with my own eyes.
2016.
And I think part of the reason
that you
are having such a sense of shock ripple throughout this administration is because those tapes go all the way back
It's
to
really
the
dead
campaign,
then?
and because Omarosa had said over and over again that there are more tapes. And so I
Divine
think we can
smile on
expect
you.
that at some point she will be releasing some more tapes who are on those tapes, potentially Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump. Those are among the names that have been floated. But she was here for nearly a year, Katie. So imagine if she was taping Chief of Staff John Kelly in this situation room, how many other tapes she might have. Now, we don't have an exact count, but she herself has said there are more. And again, that is sending serious ripple effects throughout the entire administration.
No doubt about that. Kristen Welker, I'm going to let you go because I know you have the briefing to get to. But let's just keep going with this. And there are folks out there who would say, why are we listening to Omarosa? Or who would say, listen, Donald Trump is just an employer scorned. But you have to consider where Omarosa came from. Donald Trump, in many ways, created Omarosa on The Apprentice, that whole persona she has as the villain. Look at the Washington Post today. Manigault Newman perfected her flair for the sensational, her cult of personality, and her savvy use of media while apprenticing for the master himself, Donald J. Trump. Not just the Washington Post saying that, not just me. It's also Brian Kilmeade on Fox and Friends. Listen.
In order to sell a book, she's come out with a series of tapes, and in many ways seems to have outsmarted the president, who has taken the bait and gone out and tweeted directly after her.
Eli, the president, if he was watching Fox and Friends this morning, must not have been happy.
Yeah, he didn't retweet that quote from Brian Kilmeade, but, you know, the irony of all of this is not really lost on any of us. As you pointed out, Omarosa and Donald Trump, they're kindred spirits. There's something about her that he marveled at, her ability to create drama, the way she made things about her, and just the way she bullied people. She was a recurring character through years of The Apprentice, and then came into the White House.
I'm out here on the porch.
Getting here, and so there can't be a whole lot of surprise that she was recording things. I mean, recording things, non-disclosure agreements, the culture that we're talking about in the White House is not unlike the culture at Trump Tower for years and years, where Michael Cohen and Donald Trump were thought to be recording conversations. There was a lot of manipulation and deviousness going on, and I think what's striking is that that has continued in a White House. Typically, presidential administrations, you don't need non-disclosure agreements. You're not recording each other. The people that are there are typically
I cleaned the sink last night.
A sense of loyalty, and a loyalty to a larger mission and a shared sense of values. And that is what's missing from this administration. As somebody put it to me yesterday, it just seems entirely transactional. And that's something that has really been Trump's approach this whole
Oh, no, God.
Talking about the flair for the sensational, Eli,
Yeah.
at the top of the show, and they're totally going to be asking Sarah Sanders about that today. We asked the White House yesterday about this, and they had no response. But Omarosa claiming that the president knew about the emails, the WikiLeaks emails, before WikiLeaks released them. I pressed her to find out why she thought that, and she didn't have an answer for that, or how she knew that. She didn't have an answer for that. Now Rudy Giuliani, the president's own lawyer, is forced to comment on this, and he's calling her a liar. Listen.
I know she's lying because I was on the campaign more than she was. I was closer than she was. I was from about June to November. I was with him 24 hours a day. The first WikiLeaks exposure, he was completely surprised.
Nick, what do you make of that?
Well, look, first of all, the mayor has had credibility problems himself acting as the president's lawyer. He's changed his story in several areas a couple of times. We're dealing with two people who have credibility problems here. It's hard to know who to believe, and I think the critical question is the one you hinted at a bit earlier, Katie. If she has all these tapes, do her tapes include any firm evidence the president knew in advance? That is a question that will take what is basically a ridiculous sideshow here and actually give it some importance. If Omarosa actually has any evidence that the president knew, it will point in the direction more of this question of collusion. It can help expand the scope of the Mueller inquiry. Until then, it's like watching Darth Vader kill the Emperor in the third Star Wars movie.
And again, I talked to her lawyer, and her lawyer said, yes, she did sit down with Robert Mueller. Again, we don't know what Robert Mueller's team asked Omarosa or what she said to them, but if she didn't say what she said to me yesterday. I imagine her phone is ringing, and the special counsel wants to talk to her again. We'll see if she clarifies that further on any other show that she might be going on tomorrow. But in talking about this and talking about what this means for the president, Natasha, you've been covering the Russia investigation so much, and right now Rudy Giuliani is still refusing to let the president, the legal team is refusing to let the president sit down for an interview with Robert Mueller, and Rudy Giuliani at the same time is demanding that the probe get wrapped up. Are we going to see a situation where Mueller ends up being forced to subpoena the president?
Well, it's becoming increasingly likely, and I think that Giuliani right now is just trying to waste time, essentially, before the midterm elections to try to convince Trump's supporters that this is all just a witch hunt that's dragging on. And he has said that it actually benefits Trump if the investigation keeps dragging on. That is the strategy now. They think that the longer that they can actually keep this going, the more the Trump supporters will actually start to get sick of it and will say, well, I'm not even going to pay any attention to this anymore. He has said that. But I think it's also important to note that if Omarosa, going back to the Omarosa revelation about WikiLeaks and how that might impact the president's kind of standing in the Russia investigation, I think that if Omarosa had tapes to the effect of the president acknowledging that he had previous knowledge of these emails before they were actually dumped by WikiLeaks, it's very unlikely that she's going to be able to release those to the public, right? I mean, those are probably very important evidence in Robert Mueller's investigation. So it's unlikely we would see any kind of proof coming out about that anytime soon, short of something, that she were just to say, and we have to rely on her word about it. Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, the timeline that is, that has been suggested prior to the WikiLeaks dump and with the Trump Tower meeting and with the George Papadopoulos meeting, of course, where he learned about the Russian emails, it does all seem to make sense and fit into the puzzle of the president possibly knowing about these emails before they were dumped.
And Rudy Giuliani is telling Fox News that he believes that Mueller's team is going to give him a decision on their counter-proposal for an interview potentially this week. And now he's saying we're coming down to his looking really bad by interfering in the election. I think he has to get it over with by the beginning or early September. So Rudy Giuliani is making demands on when this can happen, but at the same time, or making demands on how the interview can happen, while at the same time, Eli, demanding that it get wrapped up before the election. September still is very close to the election. It's hard to believe that Mueller's team would make a decision or come out with a conclusion that close to November. You'd have to imagine it's going to be after the midterms at this point, Eli.
It may be, and that may be a consideration. That also may be the case because there's just more work to be done and more people for investigators to interview in addition to wanting to sit down with the president. I don't think the special counsel is going to be pushed by Rudy Giuliani on television trying to prejudice the country against the entire investigation. I don't think that is going to really affect the special counsel's decision-making too much when figuring out when to end the probe, regardless of whatever arbitrary deadline the president's TV lawyers are presenting to the country.
Kristen Welker, who already left us, Eli Stokols, Nick Confessori, and Natasha Bertrand. Guys, thank you very much. And up next, let's go to the Manafort trial. It's coming to a close. We're live outside the federal court in Virginia, where Paul Manafort's fate could be handed to a jury at any moment.
Fact is, every insurance company hopes you drive safely. But Allstate actually helps you drive safely with DriveWise. It lets you know when you go too fast, can brake too hard. With feedback to help you drive safer, giving you the power to actually lower your cost. Unfortunately, you can't do anything about that. Now that you know the truth, are you in good hands?
This is Casper, the company bringing bedtime back to millions of happy sleepers. Try America's #1 rated mattress for 100 nights, risk-free. Unbox better sleep at Casper.com.
So I have this recurring dream. I'm 85 years old, in a job where I have to wear a giant hot dog suit.
What? Where's that coming from?
I don't know. I started my 401k early, I diversified. I'm not a big spender.
That sounds like you're doing a lot.
But I still feel like I'm not going to have enough for retirement, like there's something else I should be doing.
With the right conversation, you might find you're doing okay.
So no hot dog soup.
Unless you want to. Schedule a complimentary gold plating session today with TD Ameritrade.
Jimmy's gotten used to his whole room smelling like sweaty odors. Yep, he's gone nose blind. He thinks it smells fine, but his mom smells this. Luckily for all your hard-to-wash fabrics, there's Febreze Fabric Refresher. Febreze doesn't just mask, it eliminates odors you've gone nose blind to. And try Febreze Unstoppables for fabric. With up to twice the fresh scent power, you'll want to try it again, and maybe just one more time. Indulge in irresistible freshness. Febreze Unstoppables. Breathe happy.
Your brain changes as you get older, but Prevagen helps your brain with an ingredient originally discovered in jellyfish. In clinical trials, Prevagen has been shown to improve short-term memory. Prevagen, healthier brain, better life.
The 2018 MTV Video Music Awards. Who will win Video of the Year? Ariana Grande, Bruno Mars, Camila Cabello, The Carters, Childish Gambino, or Drake. Find out at the MTV Video Music Awards, live Monday, August 20th at 9, 8 central. Don't miss the MTV Video Music Awards. Who will win Best Pop? Ariana Grande, Camila Cabello, Demi Lovato, Ed Sheeran, Pink, or Shawn Mendes. Find out at the MTV Video Music Awards, live Monday, August 20th at 9, 8 central.
Summer's calling. The 2018 Cadillacs are ready to move. Our best offers on 2018 models are here. Join us for the Made to Move sales event. Get 0% APR financing for 60 months plus $2,000 down payment assistance with financing GM Financial on most 2018 models.
We have a bunch of questions. Have we ever seen anything like that before in American governance? Did this thing actually end? Is it still going on? Am I asking the right questions here? That's the heart of the matter, right? Should those dots be connected? Do I have that right? Am I right to see it that way? How are we supposed to know? What do you make of that decision? Is that accurate? What does that sound like to you? Is that weird? What does that mean? Sounds a little nuts, right? Is it fair to say? What's going on with that? Why is this happening? Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Lots more to get to tonight. Stay with us. Jurors in the Paul Manafort trial could begin deliberations as soon as today. This hour, defense lawyers for the former Trump campaign chairman are delivering their closing argument. The prosecution had its turn with its closing argument earlier, and they told a packed courtroom that Manafort lied when he had money, and he lied to get more money when he didn't. Joining me from outside the courthouse in Alexandria, NBC News national security and justice reporter Julia Ainsley, and former U.S. Attorney Guy Lewis. Julia, so far, what's the defense's argument right now?
So it's interesting, Katie, they're splitting it up, and Richard Wessling is doing the first piece. Kevin Downing will go later, and we'll hear more about Gates. Richard Wessling is focused on the bank fraud issue. He's trying to say that because these banks never reported the fact that they were defrauded to the federal government, that the only reason why we're in court is because the special counsel came along and decided to cobble together this information, find places where the numbers didn't match, and try to overwhelm the jury with a lot of evidence, even if it isn't very strong evidence. He's going through piece by piece to try to show places where there could be a reasonable doubt. He's much more charismatic than the prosecution, Katie. He's started out by thanking the jury, telling them that they were doing a service to their country, and then he put up this chart that shows just how high of a burden the government has, and that they reinforce that idea that he has to be guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I think what he wants to do is to sow a seed of doubt, at least in the minds of some jurors, so that they can convict on all counts, or perhaps if there's one who really withholds, convict on any counts. But there was a very persuasive argument we heard from the prosecution earlier today, so the defense definitely has its work cut out for them.
Just one juror, but how effective can the defense arguing the stakes in terms of the burden of proof that the prosecution needs to make? In your experience, Guy, I mean, this defense team didn't call a single witness. They're trying to get the whole case thrown out by saying the prosecution did not meet its burden of proof, and now they're re-emphasizing that, according to Julia, to the jury and saying they didn't meet it, they didn't meet it, they didn't meet it. That clearly is their best argument right now, not necessarily to say that Paul Manafort is not a criminal. So how effective can that be with a jury?
Katie, it's very interesting. I love this part of the case, the closing arguments. Now remember a couple of things. One, the government, the prosecutors, they have to convince all of the jury to convict. All 12 have to agree to convict. The defense, on the other hand, Katie, all they need is one person to hang the jury, to come in there and say, look, I just don't buy this. The evidence doesn't stack up. I think Gates is a liar, and I don't trust him, and therefore I have a reason out. That's what the defense is banking on right here. They didn't put on a single witness, single document. Trying the case, I might try to introduce a little evidence. I don't think the defendant would testify, but I like to put something before the jury, even some character evidence.
A positive
to say, hey,
defense.
Got it. I got to put something as opposed to just letting the prosecution steamroll. The last point, Katie, that I think we need to remember is in federal court, believe it or not, about 90% of the cases that go to a jury trial, guess what the result is? Across the nation, guilty, at least on one or more counts, and one count is a guilty on all counts for purposes of sentencing in this case.
Not a good ratio for Paul Manafort. Julie, let's talk about the politics of this. Politically speaking, if Paul Manafort is found guilty by this jury, if the Trump campaign chairman is found guilty of bank and tax fraud, what does this mean for Mueller's larger investigation?
Well, you know, we've got 18 counts, and you can see that even if he's acquitted on some of the counts, Giuliani and others in the Trump camp could really seize on that and say that Mueller is out of bounds here and that he's just grasping for straws and he really doesn't have a strong case. But these are very serious charges. It could potentially put Manafort in jail for the rest of his life, especially if you consider the D.C. case that's coming next month. And obviously that doesn't look great considering that President Trump hired Paul Manafort. There was even a time I thought about that just in the defense's argument. They say, look, Paul Manafort is someone who has a long career in politics, that he had to work with other people, and sometimes the people he worked with weren't necessarily trustworthy. They're trying to lay the groundwork to try to disqualify Rick Gates as a witness. But I started thinking, well, wait, did the president hire trustworthy people to work on his campaign? It's pretty easy to make that connection, and I think that this would embolden Mueller. Giuliani even said so as much.
Well, listen, Rick Gates was deputy campaign manager, number one, and number two, he worked on the transition, so that's a very good connection to make, Julia. Julia Ainsley, thank you so much, and Guy Lewis, thank you as well. By the end of the day, Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump's fingerprints will be all over a record number of judges on the country's second highest courts. That's next, as we are still waiting for Sarah Huckabee Sanders to begin today's White House briefing. Will she be asked about Omarosa claiming that Donald Trump knew about the emails, the Clinton emails, before WikiLeaks released them? We will see, and we will be right back.
Wherever forces clash,
Some incoming rounds have been whistling past.
wherever leaders assert their power,
They not only stood next to each other, they stood up for each other.
our journalists will be there, bringing the world into focus.
I don't keep track of regrets. I never count the wrinkles. And I don't add up the years. But what I do count on is staying happy and healthy. So I add protein, vitamins, and minerals to my diet with Boost.
New Boost High Protein Nutritional Drink now has 33% more high-quality protein, along with 26 essential vitamins and minerals your body needs, all with guaranteed great taste.
The upside? I'm just getting started.
Boost High Protein. Be up for life.
We use Angie's List because we can always find great local pros.
For any type of home project.
I use Angie's List because it's free. Free to read reviews.
Check their ratings. They can even match my project to qualified pros.
Go to angieslist.com today.
Have you been told you need neck or back surgery? If so, you do have a choice. Call Laser Spine Institute and say yes to a pain-free life with our minimally invasive spine surgery. It's safer than open back surgery, letting you get back to living life on your terms.
I can lift my son high over my head again.
If you have spinal stenosis, bulging or herniated disc, sciatica, or other chronic spine conditions,
Call 1-800-467-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Thanks to a less than 1-inch incision, you'll be up and walking within hours of surgery, so you can get back to your life in days instead of months.
I feel like Laser Spine Institute was an answer to prayer.
Join the thousands of people every year who say goodbye to chronic neck and back pain with Laser Spine Institute. Make today the day you say yes to living a pain-free life.
Call 1-800-467-BACK now for your free MRI review.
Hey, renovators. Time to dream bigger. You got what I need for my renovation. I love all these options, so much to choose from. Bedrooms and basements, even my kitchen is good in between. And my job is complete right here. Start your renovation at wayfair.com.
So I needed legal advice. And I heard that my cousin's wife's sister's husband was a lawyer, so I called him. But he never called me back.
If your cousin's wife's sister's husband isn't a lawyer, call LegalZoom and we'll connect you with an attorney. LegalZoom, where life meets legal.
During the BMW Summer On Sales event, receive credit of up to $3,000 in select models.
Summer's calling. The 2018 Cadillacs are ready to move. Our best offers on 2018 models are here. Join us for the Made to Move sales event. Get 0% APR financing for 60 months plus $2,000 down payment assistance with financing GM Financial on most 2018 models.
The Senate is back from vacation, and Brett Kavanaugh is seizing the moment. Here is the president's second Supreme Court nominee moments ago on Capitol Hill, where he plans to meet with two red state Democrats ahead of his likely confirmation in October. And while the future political bent of the Supreme Court is getting all the attention, it is also important to pay attention to what's happening on the circuit courts, too. Especially today, because the president and his Republican allies could reshape circuit courts for a generation. The Senate plans to approve two of Donald Trump's nominees to the Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit by the end of the day. If they make it to the bench, they'll join 24 appellate judges already confirmed, a record for any presidency.
We will set the record, I believe, for the most judges appointed, which is a very important thing. We're putting great, talented people who see the Constitution the way it's written.
If I have a choice between taking up a particular bill or taking up a circuit court judge, I take up a circuit court judge because I think it makes the longest lasting contribution.
Let's bring in MSNBC legal analyst and editor-in-chief of Lawfare, Benjamin Wittes. In his piece for The Atlantic, he blames both Republicans and Democrats for the battles over Supreme Court picks. We're going to get to that part of it in a moment, but first let's talk about the circuit courts. Look at this from the Washington Post. There are 179 authorized judgeships for the U.S. Court of Appeals. With 24 confirmations and 13 vacancies to fill, Trump and the Republicans have the power to install more than 20% of the judges on the nation's second highest courts. And when you go out there and you talk to Donald Trump supporters or even lawmakers, Ben, about why they still support Donald Trump despite all of the inflammatory things he says and all of the policies that get put in place that people don't necessarily like, etc., what they'll point to is that, hey, listen, he's installing conservative judges, and that's exactly what I want him to do, and I'm willing to swallow the rest of it in order to get those judges on the courts.
That is exactly what they'll say, and interestingly, on that point, they and the left are broadly in agreement, right? Which is that everybody seems to agree that Donald Trump is having a huge impact on the courts. And there's a sense in which that is true, which is that he's confirmed a bunch of circuit court judges, a large number for the first 2 years. But it is important to understand that those judges have almost largely replaced other Republican-appointed judges. And so to the extent that the concern is that there is some huge balance shift of the courts taking place, that is really actually not happening.
Yeah,
You know,
just click it off and start over.
I think about 45% Republican-appointed at the outset of the Trump administration, and they're about 50% Republican-appointed now. And so I do think the broad point that he's confirming a lot of people is true. They're not, by the way, judges who are different in character from what you would expect of other Republican presidents, but he's definitely getting a bunch of them confirmed. He's tending to get them confirmed to seats that are being vacated by other people very much like them.
All the attention goes to the Supreme Court, but Mitch McConnell, as you just heard, said he wants to focus more on the circuit courts. Why would Mitch McConnell focus more on the circuit courts? How much more of an impact can they have than the Supreme Court?
Well, so circuit courts
I might need to use a mouse or the pointing device on the touchpad.
Court of last appeal for almost all litigants. The Supreme Court hears, 75, 80 cases a year. Everything else gets decided at the terminal stage by one or the other of the circuit courts. And so, number one, they're really important on that score. Number two, they are the kind of testing ground for Supreme Court justices, almost all of whom now come from prior circuit court service. And finally, they're important, and don't underestimate this, because interest groups and senators have decided they're important and that they're something we want to fight over. And therefore, if you get a lot of them confirmed and the other side's angry about it, then that's a big win.
Let's talk about the Supreme Court and what you wrote in The Atlantic. We don't like acknowledging that the only real principle at issue, the Senate's treatment of judicial confirmations, boils down to power. Who has it and who doesn't at any given moment in time? You're talking about partisanship when it comes to nominating someone like Brett Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, that's not just about the Supreme Court, that's also about the circuit courts. It used to be that we had a broad gentlemen's and gentlewomen's agreement as to judicial nominations, that if people were qualified and there was not stuff that was disqualifying about them, we considered the ideological fight to be something that was decided at the time of the election.
So what was the seminal moment, though? I just want to talk about when did this suddenly change so dramatically? Was it before Mitch McConnell decided not to even have a hearing for Merrick Garland? Was that made worse? Did that have no impact? I mean, that certainly was a remarkable moment that the Senate Majority Leader refused to even have a hearing to put somebody on the Supreme Court while the election was going on.
It was a remarkable moment, and it was a dramatic escalation. And it was, in my opinion, a horrible thing to do to a very decent person who was an excellent judge and had been appointed by a president who was, with an appointment of a nominee that centrist and moderate, explicitly trying to reach out to people who might be disinclined to confirm a justice during an election. And that said, it was not the only escalation, it was the latest escalation in a long series that started, I mean, it's kind of in the dawns, in the mists of time, but, for a lot of Republicans, the Bork nomination is a kind of watershed. There were, Democrats held some nominees up at the lower court levels in that period, and during the first Bush administration, Republicans retaliated during the Clinton administration.
I'm so sorry, I have to interrupt you. I didn't want to, but here is Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Including by controlling access to it. Today, in fulfilling that responsibility, I've decided to revoke the security clearance of John Brennan, former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Historically, former heads of intelligence and law enforcement agencies have been allowed to retain access to classified information after their government service so that they can consult with their successors regarding matters about which they may have special insights and as a professional courtesy. Neither of these justifications supports Mr. Brennan's continued access to classified information. First, at this point in my administration, any benefits that senior officials might glean from consultations with Mr. Brennan are now outweighed by the risks posed by his erratic conduct and behavior. Second, that conduct and behavior has tested and far exceeded the limits of any professional courtesy that may have been due to him.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Brennan has a history
I did my best for everything.
His objectivity and credibility. In 2014, for example, he denied to Congress
At least now you know.
CIA officials under his supervision had improperly accessed the computer
That's none of my
files of
business.
congressional staffers. He told the Council of Foreign Relations that the CIA would never do such a thing. The CIA's Inspector General, however, contradicted Mr. Brennan directly, concluding unequivocally that agency officials had indeed improperly accessed congressional staffers' files. More recently, Mr. Brennan told Congress that the intelligence community did not make use of the so-called Steele dossier in an assessment regarding the 2016 election, an assertion contradicted by at least 2 other senior officials in the intelligence community and all of the facts. Additionally, Mr. Brennan has recently leveraged his status as a former high-ranking official with access to highly sensitive information to make a series of unfounded and outrageous allegations, wild outbursts on the internet and television about this administration. Mr. Brennan's line and recent conduct, characterized by increasingly frenzied commentary, is wholly inconsistent with access to the nation's most closely held secrets and facilities, the very aim of our adversaries, which is to sow division and chaos. More broadly, the issue of Mr. Brennan's security clearance raises larger questions about the practice of former officials maintaining access to our nation's most sensitive secrets long after their time in government has ended. Such access is particularly inappropriate when former officials have transitioned into highly partisan positions and seek to use real or perceived access to sensitive information to validate their political attacks. Any access granted to our nation's secrets should be in furtherance of national, not personal interest. For this reason, I've also begun to review the more general question of the access to classified information by government officials. As part of this review, I am evaluating action with respect to the following individuals: James Clapper, James Comey, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr. Security clearances for those who still have them may be revoked, and those who have already lost their security clearance may not be able to have it reinstated. It is for the foregoing reasons that I have exercised my constitutional authority to deny Mr. Brennan access to classified information, and I will direct appropriate staff of the National Security Council to make the necessary arrangements with the appropriate agencies to implement this determination. With that, I'll take your question. Jonathan.
Sir, first I've got a question I wanted to ask, but first just to follow up on that. It seems like everybody that you mentioned has been a political critic of the presidency, going after his political opponents with this?
No, if there were others that weren't, that we deemed necessary, we would certainly take a look and review those as well.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about something the president's attorney said. Rudy Giuliani said of the special counsel Robert Mueller needs to write the damn report so we can see it and rebut it. And he said if it's not written within the next 2 or 3 weeks, quote, he will just unload on him like a ton of bricks. Is the president okay with his attorney threatening the special counsel in this way?
Certainly we've made clear we'd like to see this wrap up. For questions specific about comments by Mr. Giuliani, I'd refer you back to him.
Was that authorized by the president?
Once again, for questions specific about the investigation, particularly comments from Rudy Giuliani, I'd refer you back to him to address those. Jeff.
Sarah, following up on John's question, how is this announcement by the president, how can Americans not interpret that as
I'm sure you've made note of who's been the most.
Isn't it also an attempt to curtail their freedom of speech by analyzing them for being critical on television?
Not at all. The president has a constitutional responsibility to protect classified information and who has access to it. And that's what he's doing, is fulfilling that responsibility in this action. This is action only specific to Mr. Brennan, and the others are currently under review.
The president wants to set for future presidents when his administration is out of office, and why are there no Republicans on that list?
Once again, if we deemed it necessarily, we would certainly look into that and be happy to review those. Justin?
I wanted to ask about Turkey, but just to follow on what Jeff said. this only a list of Democrats who have been critical of the administration? And why should Americans have confidence that you are taking this seriously if there's not a single Republican on that list?
Again, certainly we would look at those if we deemed it necessary, and we'll keep you posted if that list gets updated.
On Turkey, Turkey announced that they're going to select tariffs on about $2 billion of American goods. Just wondering if you have a response to that, and if there's any discussion internally about retaliating towards that, continuing to escalate this.
Now, the tariffs from Turkey are certainly regrettable and a step in the wrong direction. The tariffs that the United States placed on Turkey were out of national security interest. Theirs are out of retaliation. I'm not going to get ahead of anything on what we may or may not do in an effort to respond, but certainly we don't support Turkey's decision to retaliate against us protecting our national security interest.
An appeals court in Turkey today denied Pastor Brunson's appeal to try to be released. The administration view that as a setback or as sort of maintaining the status quo?
We feel that Turkey and specifically President Erdogan have treated Pastor Brunson, who we know to be a very good person and a strong Christian who's done nothing wrong, very unfairly, very badly. It is something that we won't forget in the administration. Let's move on. Jake, go ahead.
So the administration has put out a robust defense on Pastor Brunson, but at the same time, there are tens of thousands of Christians in North Korea who have been imprisoned almost exclusively because of their religion. Open Door USA considered North Korea to be the #1 country when it comes to persecution of Christians. Is this something that the administration has also been looking into?
Certainly, we would like to see any individual persecuted for their Christian beliefs or imprisoned released. Again, we've been working with North Korea on a number of fronts. That's something we'd certainly like to see them change their behavior. I know it's been discussed, and again, certainly something we'd like to see their behavior change. Sorry, Jake, I gotta just to follow. Go ahead.
My other question. Although territory held by ISIS has been reduced by over 90%, the recent Iran report suggests that as many as 30,000 ISIS members still exist in Iraq and Syria. So, first of all, what's the administration's take on this specific Iran report? And secondly, what would the administration consider an overall victory against ISIS?
We'd like to see every single member of ISIS defeated across the globe. I think that would be the ultimate victory. John, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Closing arguments are taking place across the river in Alexandria for the tax fraud trial of Paul Manafort. And in mid-June, the president said that he felt badly for Mr. Manafort and that he believes he's being treated unfairly. Is the president still friends with Mr. Manafort? When was the last time you spoke to Mr. Manafort?
I'm not aware of any recent conversations that they've had. Blake?
He's being treated unfairly.
I think that the president's made that clear in his previous comments. I don't have anything to add beyond that at this point. Blake, go ahead.
Sarah, thank you. You just said a couple minutes ago that the increased tariff levels with Turkey were out of the national security interest. But when the president announced it on Twitter last week or earlier this month, he said, quote, at the time, he said, our relations with Turkey are not good at this time. The suggestion there being that this has to do with the pastor that is being held in Turkey. Simply put, if Pastor Brunson is allowed to leave Turkey, do those tariff levels go away? Is that kind of the deal that could be in place?
No, the tariffs that are in place on steel would not be removed with the release of Pastor Brunson. The tariffs are specific to national security. The sanctions, however, that have been placed on Turkey are specific to Pastor Brunson and others that we feel are being held unfairly, and we would consider that at that point.
What in the interest of national security, what's changed over the last month or so with Turkey that could justify national security?
Again, the president's been clear about the steel and aluminum industries, steel particularly in this case, that those are industries that must be protected. We must have the ability to reach certain levels of manufacturing those products here in the United States for the purposes of national security. John?
Thank you, Sarah.
Alrighty then.
I was going to ask about Turkey, but based on your opening statement, I have to point out that the attorneys from former Director Foley and former Deputy Director McCabe say that their passes were automatically demagnetized the day that they were separated from their offices. Two others, Mr. Clapper and General Hayden, said they do not use the pass at all. And also, it's my understanding from a historical standpoint, this would be the first time the president himself removed the passes from anybody, that has normally been done by agency heads or immediate superiors to people. Have you considered all these things in the process you say you're going to?
Again, the other individuals, those are being reviewed. That determination will be made at a later date. Those that have already been removed, it would be for the purpose of reviewing whether or not they should be reinstated or not.
Speak to my father, Focus.
It's busier now that things... I am. Here you go.
Is that the only standard by which this administration is asserting you should have a security?
If you need any supplies...
Again, I've laid out the reasons in the opening statement. Specific to Director Brennan, the others are currently under review. Don't have any specifics on this at this point.
Is that the standard? If you give erroneous testimony, you say something you have to correct at a certain date in the future. If you work with this administration, for example, does that mean you can lose your security clearance?
My understanding is this is being looked at on a case-by-case basis, which is why each individual is being reviewed and determination made at that point.
Does the administration have any reason to believe or evidence to suggest that Brennan has misused classified information or monetized his access?
You got a good thing going here now that you've reopened the mines.
Again, I've laid out the reasons for the decision that was made on this specific instance.
I
will continue to review the other actions.
Andrew, reason by the absence of you not saying those things, you didn't find any evidence.
No, I wouldn't make any assumptions. I'm telling you what the decision was based off on in this case.
And I have you to thank for.
Glover Mallory's the name. If you're looking for a smith, you found one of the best. Either you're here to get showered and spark, or you're looking for something to buy. Out with it.
As always, we're going to continue to review and look at the best ways to move forward. I'll leave it to the Department of Defense to get into specifics about tactical situations on the ground. What I can tell you is that we're committed to finding a political solution to end the conflict in Afghanistan. We're exploring all avenues for dialogue and close coordination with the Afghan government. We're going to continue to do that. If we have announcements or changes in the policy, we'll certainly let you know. Peter?
Certain question, if I may. You guys assess whether the liquidity situation in Turkey's financial sector is a risk in light of the fall of Emirates reported in the last 3 or 4 days?
Certainly, we're monitoring the situation with respect to the Turkish economy and the decline of the lira. But Turkey's economic problems, those are part of a long-term trend, something of its own making and not the result of any actions the United States has taken. Sager?
You got a good thing going.
One of the individuals that you listed on that list that clearance that is under review is Bruce Ward. He's a current employee of the Department of Justice. So instead of putting him under the review, does the president believe he should be fired?
I don't have any personnel announcements on that front. I can only speak to this specific
Why put a security clearance under review which would render him unable to do his job and not just fire him?
Once again, I don't have any personnel announcements on that front. I can just tell you we're looking into that specific matter. Peter, I'm sorry, I called on you earlier.
People who criticize the president publicly on TV, public criticisms, are there greater risks of security clearances of people who stay silent?
Once again, this is looked at on a case-by-case basis, and we'll do an individual review and make that determination. Kevin?
Thank you, Sarah. A question about the return of lawmakers on Capitol Hill, and then a follow very quickly. Now that they're back, can you sort of lay out the White House strategy for moving forward with this agenda? We've talked about wall funding. Obviously, a lot of people are very curious about the Kavanaugh nomination moving forward, DACA and other issues. Is there a strategy in place to begin the work with lawmakers now that they're back?
Certainly. We have continued ongoing conversations on a number of fronts with lawmakers, even while they were not here in Washington. We are happy that the hearing dates have been set for Justice Kavanaugh, and we look forward to seeing him get confirmed.
My very quick follow-up was First of all, you didn't mention anything about a possible shutdown. Is that still something that the president is continuing in my mind? It's going to be on the farm bill. There are a great number of people in a great number of states that are curious about this work requirement, the USDA.
Either you're here to get showered and sparked,
in some places they already have it. They say you have to work. In other areas, you don't have that requirement. Is that something the White House still supports?
Something we still support in terms of a shutdown. I don't have any announcements on that front. We certainly still want to see a lot of things happen. We'd love for Congress to actually do its job, particularly when it comes to immigration. We have a completely broken system, and we'd like to see them work with us to fix it.
Thank you, Sarah.
I don't have any updates for you on that front right now. Catherine?
Omarosa Nagel was the highest-ranking African-American staffer in the West Wing. No black.
She actually didn't work in the West Wing, but go ahead.
No staffer has been appointed at the level since her absence. Can you tell us exactly how many African-American staffers there are in this building? And is it a priority for the administration to reflect the diversity of the country?
Certainly, as I addressed yesterday, we value diversity, not just at the White House, but throughout the entire administration. And we're going to continue trying to diversify the staff. We have a large number of diverse staffers from various backgrounds, both race, religion, gender. Look, I'm not going to go through and do a count. The same way I'm not going to do a sit down and count on the staffers that are in your news organizations. And we would love to diversify our staff and continue to do so. We do think it's important. We're going to continue to work to make that happen. Raquel?
Thank you very much. On the election last night, we are seeing the Democrats embracing a more diversity, choosing Muslims, also candidates, transgender candidates, rejecting president's agenda. So my question is, what do you think will be the impact of his agenda and also these recent controversies about race and minorities on the election in November?
Again, I think people are looking at the policies that the individuals are implementing and how those are going to affect those communities and whether or not it's actually going to help individuals, people across this country. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're focused on. That's what we're going to continue to do. We'll take one last question, Eamon.
Thanks, Sarah. I'd like to ask you a couple questions about the President's recent comments, if I could. One is on Harley-Davidson. The President commented earlier in the week, many Harley-Davidson owners plan to boycott the company if manufacturing moves overseas. Great. Is the President of the United States endorsing the boycott of an iconic American company?
Look, the President has made his feelings on that very clear. The President's focus is on making sure that we get good trade deals and that we keep business and industry here in the United States.
A boycott of Harley?
I think he'd rather see them put all their companies back here in the United States and build all of their great machines here in this country. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Question. How do you get Omarosa off the news? Answer. By revoking the security clearance of the former director of the CIA. The White House. Sarah Huckabee Sanders right there, just announcing from the president directly that he will revoke the security clearance of Mr. Brennan. Mr. Brennan has been an incredibly strong critic of the president for many months now. Take a look at a tweet he sent just the other day. It's astounding how often you fail to live up to minimum standards of decency, civility, and probity. Seems like you'll never understand what it means to be president, nor what it takes to be a good, decent, and honest person. So disheartening, so dangerous for our nation. Sarah Sanders also saying that the following officials, former officials, now have their security clearance under review. James Clapper, James Comey, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and Bruce Orr. Bruce Orr currently works at the DOJ, so that would impact how he does his job. No Republicans from any Republican administration named on that list. Sarah Sanders was asked directly how the American public could trust that this is not a partisan thing. The president isn't doing this as political retribution for his critics. For example, why isn't Michael Flynn on that list? After all, the president's former national security advisor pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Sarah Sanders did not have an answer for that, only said that they will review when they feel like they need to review the various people. Let's go right to a couple folks that we have standing by. We've got NBC's Kristen Welker, who's in the briefing room, and political reporter for the New York Times, Nick Consistory, along with Lawfare editor-in-chief Ben Wittes, also on the phone, MSNBC national security analyst Ned Price. Ned, first to you, since you work in national security, what is this saying to folks like Clapper, Comey, Hayden, Yates, Wright, Page, and Strzok, or anybody else who has a security clearance still, and even though they've left the administration or even in the administration, what does it say to them about the way that they are allowed to speak about this president?
Well, it's saying quite clearly, Katie, that we live in a country, we have a president who cannot countenance the First Amendment rights of all of those Americans who have been public servants, and those Americans who are now private citizens, to express their private, personal views. That is precisely what John Brennan has done over the past several months. It didn't require a security clearance. He never invoked any sort of classified knowledge or his long-standing experience in our intelligence community. He was articulating his well-founded opinion, personal opinion, about Donald Trump's conduct in office. This is quite clearly designed to send a chilling effect to all of those who would criticize Donald Trump, who would criticize his administration, to send a signal to them that this will not be tolerated, that they need to sit down and shut up.
Kristen Welker, Sarah Sanders was asked what the standard was for revoking the security clearance of John Brennan. She mentioned at the top contradictory statements that he had made in testimony, erroneous statements that he had made in testimony. CBS White House reporter Major Garrett asked her if that was the standard going forward for whether this White House would revoke the security clearance for anybody if they said something false in testimony in front of Congress. And she couldn't say definitively that that would be the standard. So what are we left to believe here? Does this just mean this only applies to political critics of the president? They're going to apply it when they feel like it's necessary to apply it? Is that a fair way to interpret this?
Well, there are no Republicans on that list, Katie. Let's start there. Second of all, initially when she came out several months ago and said the president was looking into this possibility, remember, one of her chief criticisms was that some of these folks have been monetizing the information that they have. She didn't go back to that talking point today, and Major Garrett pressed her on that as well. You heard her say that. By the way, John Brennan's attorney at the time came out and said that he has not monetized any of the classified information that he has been privy to. So it's not clear exactly what the standard is. Katie, she was pressed over and over again whether or not this is political. One of my colleagues saying it's hard to see it in any other light, given the fact that a number of these people have been staunch critics of the president. John Brennan just last night, again, reiterating in his words that he sees the president as a danger to this country. Sanders pushing back against that characterization, but I would offer one more point, Katie, which is that this is an administration that has been very eager to shift the narrative away from Omarosa, her tapes, all of the allegations that she has been making, and so this undoubtedly will do that today, Katie.
And Nick, the other day, Paul Ryan, when he was asked about whether the president would do this when this first came on, and Paul Ryan seemed to brush it off, saying the president is just trolling people.
Well, I think the speaker should look again at the consequences here. This is just an extraordinary moment. I think sometimes when a White House does something extremely obvious, we should take the point. The fact that there are no Republicans on that list makes it very obvious, and the fact that Sarah Huckabee Sanders could offer no explanation of why shows that this is not really a standard about conduct. It's a standard of who's being criticized. Those are all critics of the president.
Turn on menu readout by selecting the bottom left corner or skip to go to home screen.
Wrongdoing, he's a serving official. His accusation there, or the criticism of him, is emanating from conservative magazines. It's a very strange thing to do.
And Ben, we only have a couple more seconds, but can you just wrap it up for us?
Yeah, one of the following two people, Donald Trump and John Brennan, just had his security clearance stripped for being for making false statements and behaving erratically. And it was not Donald Trump. It was Trump himself. stripped the clearance, that means we are living in absurd times.
Erratic conduct, outbursts on Twitter, sowing division would seem to describe the president, not necessarily John Brennan. Gentlemen,
That's just how
Walker, thank you very much. We did reach out to John Brennan. He's thinking about joining us. He's considering it right now. If he does, Ali Velshi will immediately bring him to you. Ali Velshi, what a day. I started this segment by saying, question, how do you get Omarosa off the news?
Yeah.
Answer, revoke the security clearance of the former CIA director.
It'll only be partially successful because we now know these tricks, right? We know what it's all about. There was nothing pressing on the agenda today that determined that these people would be named and their security clearance would be revoked. But I tend to think there's a drawer or a bag at the White House where they've got a bunch of tricks on hold for whenever they cannot get off the subject. It's now, was it Wednesday today? And we have been going at this for a few days. The White House cannot control its messaging this week, so they try something new.
Must be pretty bad.
The beauty is that we're on TV a lot. We have a lot of time. We can handle all sort of things. We can chew gum and walk at the same time, so we're going to do that.
Speak for yourself.
Have a good afternoon. See you on TV today. All right, good afternoon. I'm Ali Velshi. To protect the nation's classified information. That's the reasoning Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders gave at the start of this press conference we were just talking about, where she announced the official revoking of former CIA Director John Brennan's security clearance.
Historically, former heads of intelligence and law enforcement agencies have been allowed to retain access to classified information after their government service so that they can consult with their successors regarding matters about which they may have special insights and as a professional courtesy. Neither of these justifications supports Mr. Brennan's continued access to classified information.
The White House, get this, accuses Brennan of erratic conduct and behavior. Coincidentally, it comes a day after Brennan's tweet, which was a strong rebuke against the president and his insulting language when referring to former Trump White House aide Omarosa Manigault-Newman, referring to her as a lowlife and a dog. So far this week, Newman has dominated the discussion. That's the thing that seems to be getting under the president's skin. The pressure is reportedly getting to the president and the White House. Joining me now from the White House is NBC News' Hans Nichols. Hans, this explanation seems a little strange, given that the president does nothing but tweet, and he can be described as erratic in his tweeting. It seems highly politicized.
Well, it's politicized, but it's also those who have criticized him. This doesn't follow along straight party lines. Of those 6, 7 other names he's talking about, Michael Hayden, a Republican, but very critical of the Trump administration. Of course, Jim Comey was a Republican, a registered Republican. He's now said he's a Democrat. So there are a couple Republicans on there. To me, the most interesting one from the, let's call it the enemies list side of things, of those people who are on warning, on notice that their security credentials could be, their access could be revoked. Bruce Orr, he is a sitting member of the Department of Justice, answers to Jeff Sessions, who answers to the president. He is revoking the security, or talking about revoking the security of members of his own administration that have authorities, have warrants to carry out their job. Now they have less than an ability to do that. The broader point here, though, is that, look, John Brennan's authority to criticize the president isn't derived from his intel briefing that he may still have access to. This guy was a former station chief in Saudi Arabia, he was a Homeland Security advisor, he had an office in the basement of the White House. It's not like he's using raw intel files to make his criticism of President Trump. What President Trump is clearly doing is getting into a back and forth with someone that was a member of the former administration, but his ability to criticize isn't going to be hampered by the fact that he's lost his access. That's simply not the case.
So the thing that is getting under the president's skin does not go away by him doing this, as Katie inferred a few moments ago. This may have to do with the White House not being able to control the narrative this week because of this release of Omarosa's book.
I'm glad to lend a hand.
Potentially, right? But in some ways, you're talking about, the bag of tricks the president and the White House has. And let's be clear, all White Houses like to change the conversation. They like to use words like pivot and talk about the economy or go to a different location. This was fairly drastic today, and there were no questions on Omarosa in that press briefing. There's one shouted towards the end, but Sarah Huckabee Sanders did not have to answer the question on whether or not she was aware, and when she'd asked the president specifically if he'd ever used that word, that ugly word, that racial epithet. So in some ways they did shift the conversation at least for a few hours. Alec?
Hans, good to see you as always. Thank you. Hans Nichols for us at the White House. Joining me on the phone is John McLaughlin, former Deputy Director of
of the CIA. John, good to talk to you again. Just talk to me about what Hans was just saying. The thing about John Brennan and others that are named here that gets under the president's skin is criticism of this administration, none of which is affected by whether or not John McLaughlin and others like you have clearances.
Not at all, Ali. This is ridiculous. I can think of few things the president has done that more directly indicate a kind of authoritarian attitude in his governing style. I mean, to pull clearances from someone is something that you see happen when leaders of countries that are trying to move them in that direction try to silence their enemies, along with other things they do. And clearly, nothing that John Brennan has said or that the other intelligence people on this list have said has anything to do with classified information. The reason you pull someone's clearances, the unique reason really, is if they have abused or in some way released in an unauthorized way classified information, and these people haven't done that. They've only spoken out using their First Amendment rights to state their personal opinions. And looking at abuse of classified information, the president might look in the mirror. You recall what he did when he released inappropriately classified information, it said, from an Israeli report when he talked to the Russians. So, I think it's just across the board a foolish thing to do, and I believe Katie Tur was probably correct in saying this is nothing more than a distraction at this point. The other point I'd make to you is that in my understanding, and having been involved in these cases, typically there is some sort of a hearing before this is done. Typically there is an appeal process, and often these cases can escalate to a federal court. I doubt anyone in the White House has thought through any of that. Because, as usual, they've rolled the ball down the lanes, broken up the pins without any idea of how they're going to set it back up again.
So, John, I just want to underscore something you said. You said it sort of feels like an authoritarian act. It's not just random. It is of the president's critics, which should be really more worrisome to people. It's not an across-the-board thing. It's not saying that everybody who served in prior administrations gets their security clearance revoked. This is about people. John McLaughlin in point case, but John Brennan in point case, but there are other names that the White House is evaluating, all of whom have criticized the president.
Absolutely. When I think of someone like Sally Yates, I don't know Sally Yates personally. I've met her, but I can think of few people in the federal government who've served in the Justice Department who are more respectful of classified information. You'll recall it was Sally Yates who went to the White House to alert the White House way back at the beginning of all of this, that there was a potential security and counterintelligence problem with General Flynn. So this really has the feel of someone simply trying to do two things: silence critics and also distract from another damaging political event that's going on with Ms. Omarosa.
And just to let our viewers know what's going on, the president is revoking the security clearance of former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, John Brennan. He's also evaluating the clearances of James Clapper, James Comey, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, and Bruce Moore. John McLaughlin is joining me on the phone as former deputy director of the CIA. John, how Hans Nichols just made the point that John Brennan and others in their criticisms of the president are not using any raw intelligence. They're not using classified information. What's the net effect of taking clearances away from these people?
Well, I think if you are in any way timid about expressing your personal views, the message that goes out is be careful what you say if you have a clearance and if you're worried about having it revoked. I don't think it's stretching a point too far to say that if you look inside the intelligence community, one of its duties, of course, is to speak the truth, regardless of the consequences. That sometimes involves saying things that the listener doesn't want to hear. I'm sure that's happened to President Trump a number of times. I don't think the intelligence community will shrink from that duty, but it does throw a kind of bucket of ice, if you will, onto people who have that job to think that delivering unpleasant news is not something that this particular president relishes. And I've worked for a lot of presidents, and frankly, they don't like hearing bad news, but they also sometimes thank you for it because they know that what you're trying to do ultimately is help them. I just don't have a feeling that, the way for President Trump to engage on this is if he disagrees with what they're saying, to speak up himself and express the reasons for his disagreement, not to yank their security clearances. That's what happens in a real democracy.
John, good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. John McLaughlin, former Deputy Director of the CIA. Joining me now on the phone is Ben Rhodes, MSNBC political contributor and former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Obama. Ben, good to have you with us. John Brennan tweets a lot. Something that the President takes issue with. Yesterday he tweeted in response to the President's tweets about Omarosa, "It's astounding how often you fail to live up to minimum standards of decency, civility, and probity. Seems like you will never understand what it means to be President, nor what it takes to be a good, decent, and honest person. So disheartening, so dangerous for our nation." Perhaps that was the last straw, Ben, but I'm very worried by what John McLaughlin just talked about, and that is the act of an authoritarian president in taking actions not against a group of people, but against a group of people who are only defined as his critics.
Yes, I mean, what John Brennan says on Twitter should have absolutely no bearing on his fitness to maintain a security clearance. The fact is, he served this country for decades under presidents of both parties. He is as qualified and knowledgeable about terrorism, the biggest threat to American security as anybody. He is somebody that the intelligence community, the U.S. government would want to use as a resource. And the fact is, security clearances have never been politicized like this in our history. They've been walled off from this type of political interference. And for this president to target a political enemy with a retributive act like yanking their security clearance just because he doesn't like being criticized is authoritarianism in its purest form. It's saying that if you say things that I don't like publicly, I'm going to try to do something to hurt you or embarrass you. That is not how a democracy is supposed to function. And frankly, it's dangerous for our national security to say that people who don't agree with me cannot participate in any way, shape, or form in certain discussions about securing our country when they're qualified to do so.
And Ben Rhodes obviously was the Deputy National Security Advisor. Ben, the question was asked if the President is going after people that are not supportive of him. To that point, here's what John Brennan said last night on MSNBC.
I think Donald Trump has badly sullied the reputation of the office of the presidency with his invective, with his constant disregard, I think, for human decency, as well as his befriending of autocratic leaders around the world, and his continued pursuit of relationships to benefit himself as opposed to the country. I do think that America's standing in the world has also been tarnished. But I think even more fundamentally, what he is doing here in the United States is very polarizing, and he is, I think, the most divisive president we've ever had in the Oval Office. He is feeding and fueling hatred and animosity and misunderstandings among Americans.
Ben, this is John Brennan talking about what the president is doing in revoking these security clearances. This sort of reminds us of other countries that we've heard about, where people take power and they want to clear the ranks of anybody who's critical of them. Is there a lasting effect on our republic and our democracy by seeing a president act this way? And give me some comparisons to when you were in the Obama administration. There were obviously critics. There were all sorts of critics who had national security clearances. Did this ever cross your mind to do?
No. And look, actually, some of the people who were on the list that was publicized by the White House were critics of ours. Michael Hayden was George W. Bush's CIA director, was a critic of Barack Obama. We never sat around and contemplated publicly yanking his security clearance, or privately doing so, for that matter. It really is crossing a new line. And the reason it's dangerous is, first of all, it denies the nation the resource of people with certain expertise who disagree with the president. It politicizes national security in a way that there's just no need for. I mean, how we have a counterterrorism policy that protects our country should not be subsumed under this type of petty partisan politics out of the White House. If there's someone like John Brennan, who was on the front lines of that fight against terrorism for decades, who could offer some advice, you should want that advice, and you should want to punish him. But it is also mindful of, the type of punitive actions that you would see
in autocratic countries where someone comes into power and says, I'm going to purge anybody who's different with me. I'm going to punish people who publicly criticize me. I mean, let's be very clear about what happened here. Somebody criticized the President of the United States, and so then he decided to take a public action the following day to harm that person. That's not supposed to happen in a democracy. And the fact that it's playing politics to their national security makes it that much more dangerous.
Ben, thanks for joining us with your analysis. Ben Rhodes is a former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Obama. All right, with me now, let me just ask my control room. I see him right there. Don't have to ask him anything. It's Danny Zavala standing right here next to me. Danny, good to see you. Danny, what do you make of the actual consequences of this? Let's just put this into context. This White House has been struggling and saying out loud that the media should stop covering the Omarosa stuff. On the other hand, the president's been tweeting about it almost nonstop. There are people who think this is simply an attempt to change the narrative.
It's possible. It may not even be legal. It's questionable whether or not the president can use the revocation of security clearances in this way, this summary way where he just does it by announcement, by fiat.
Right. John McLaughlin says typically it's done
there's a system. Exactly. There's a standard process. Now, there is a national security exception to that standard process, which I think Trump would probably invoke. And then he might even argue that just under Article 2, under the inherent powers of the presidency, he has the power to revoke without going through the required process. This isn't like a pardon where the president can pardon by tweet if he wants to. The revocation of national security clearances and other kinds of clearances has to be done through a standard procedure. And if the president doesn't follow that, then it may not be valid. But then there's the additional question of whether the courts can even hear this. There's precedent for the proposition that the courts can't even hear the issue of a revocation of a security clearance. This would be a case essentially of first impression when security clearances have been revoked in this fashion.
So there's a lot of stuff that's groundbreaking about this, but this president is part of an ongoing look, there have been other presidents before him, including the last two, who have been about what the president is allowed to do, and this president has sort of taken that argument further than the others.
When it comes to security clearances, President Trump is right in that the president is at the apex of security clearance rights. He is the classifier in chief and the unclassifier.
Correct. So when he was accused of giving away classified information to the Russians,